The letters on the page wouldn't stop dancing. They jumped and twisted like they had a mind of their own. While other kids in the classroom read out loud with confidence, he sat there gripping his pencil so hard his knuckles turned white. The words in front of him might as well have been written in a foreign language. "Daniel, would you like to read the next paragraph?" Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through the quiet classroom. His heart dropped. 20 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. He could feel the heat rising to his cheeks. He stared at the page, willing the letters to stay still, to make sense, to give him just one small break. But they didn't, they never did. I can't, he whispered. Some kids giggled. Tommy Richards, who sat 2 rows behind him, made that sound again. That fake coughing sound that was really meant to say stupid without actually saying it. Daniel had heard it 100 times before. This was Public School 147 in Brooklyn, and the year was 1985. The building was old even then, with radiators that clanked and hissed, windows that rattled when the subway rumbled past, and floors that creaked under every step. But to most kids it was just school. To Daniel it was the place where he felt most broken. After class, Mrs. Henderson asked him to stay behind. He knew what was coming. Another talk about applying himself or trying harder or paying attention. Adults always thought he wasn't trying. If only they knew how hard he tried. If only they could feel what it was like to have your brain scramble everything you looked at. "Daniel, I've spoken with your mother," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice softer than it was in class. "We think it's best if you join the special education classes. You'll get more help there." Special education. He knew what that meant. That's where the slow kids went. That's what Tommy Richards and his friends called them anyway. The kids who got pulled out of regular class, who ate lunch at a different table, who everyone looked at with either pity or mockery. He nodded, because what else could he do? That afternoon he walked home with his head down, kicking a bottle cap along the cracked sidewalk. His apartment was just 3 blocks away, 3 blocks that felt like 3 miles. His mom was already home from her first job. She cleaned houses during the day and would head out again at 6 to clean offices at night. His dad worked at the manufacturing plant, pulling double shifts whenever he could. They were always tired, always worried about money, and now they had to worry about him too. "It's going to be okay, baby," his mom said, pulling him into a hug that smelled like cleaning products and exhaustion. "You're smart. You're so smart. Your brain just works different, that's all." But Daniel didn't feel smart. Smart kids didn't get moved to special classes. Smart kids could read without the letters doing backflips. Smart kids had a future. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed listening to the sounds of the city outside his window. Cars honking, people shouting, music playing from someone's apartment. Through the thin walls he could hear his parents talking in the kitchen. The teacher said he might not even graduate high school. His dad's voice was low and heavy. "Don't say that. Don't ever say that." His mom sounded like she was crying. "I'm just telling you what she said. We need to be realistic. Maybe he can learn a trade or something. Work with his hands." Daniel pulled his blanket over his head. Even his own parents didn't believe in him. How could he believe in himself? But something else happened that year. Something small that would plant a seed for the future. The school janitor, Mr. Pete, an older black man with gray hair and hands scarred from years of work, found Daniel sitting alone in the hallway one afternoon. "Why you looking so down, young man?" Daniel shrugged. "I'm dumb. Can't read good." Mr. Pete sat down next to him, his keys jangling on his belt. "You know what I think? I think smart comes in different flavors. Some folks are book smart. Some folks are street smart. Some folks are hand smart." "Hand smart?" "Yeah. They good at building things, fixing things, making things work." "You ever notice how things work? Like really notice?" Daniel thought about it. He did notice things. He noticed how the radiator in his classroom made that clicking sound right before it started heating up. He noticed how the loose floorboard in the hallway was near the 3rd window. He noticed everything about how things moved and connected. "I guess so," he said. "Come with me," Mr. Pete said. He led Daniel to the boiler room in the basement. It was warm down there, and full of pipes and machines and things that hummed and clanked. Mr. Pete showed him how the heating system worked, how water traveled through the pipes, how pressure built up and released. For the first time all day, Daniel felt his brain calm down. This made sense. He could see how everything connected. It was like a puzzle, but a puzzle he could actually solve. "You see that?" Mr. Pete smiled. "You picked that up faster than most adults could. That's a kind of smart, Daniel. Don't let nobody tell you different. From that day on, Daniel started spending time with Mr. Pete after school. While other kids ran home or went to play basketball, he learned about electrical systems, plumbing, carpentry, all the things that kept the old school building running. His grades didn't improve. Reading was still torture. Math was still a nightmare. But in that basement, surrounded by tools and machines, he found something he was good at. By the time he was 12, neighbors started calling him when something broke. A lamp that wouldn't turn on. A door that wouldn't close right. A radio that only played static. Daniel would show up with Mr. Pete's old toolbox, the one he'd given him as a gift, and he'd fix it. People would try to pay him just a few dollars, and he'd take it home to his mom. "Look at you," she'd say, pride mixing with the worry that never quite left her eyes. My little engineer. He wasn't an engineer. He was barely passing 6th grade. But when he held tools in his hands, when he figured out why something wasn't working and made it right again, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely worthless. The other kids still made fun of him. Teachers still sighed when they called on him. Report cards still came home with D's and F's, but Daniel started to understand something important. The world had decided he was supposed to fail. They'd written his story before he'd even had a chance to live it. He just had to decide whether he'd let them be right. Every day, walking past Public School 147, he'd look up at that old brick building. He knew every inch of it by now. Every loose brick, every squeaky door, every window that stuck. He knew where the roof leaked and where the foundation was cracking. He knew that building better than anyone. He couldn't have known then, couldn't have even imagined that one day he'd own it. High school graduation was supposed to be a celebration. For Daniel, it felt more like escaping a burning building. He'd made it out, barely, with a diploma that felt like it weighed nothing, because everyone knew it didn't mean much. His grades were terrible. His SAT scores were even worse. College wasn't even a conversation worth having, so what now? His dad asked the night after graduation. They were sitting at the small kitchen table, the same table where Daniel had struggled through homework for years. "I'm going to Bennett Technical School," Daniel said, "for electrical work." His dad nodded slowly. Relief and disappointment fought for space on his tired face. Relief that his son had a plan. Disappointment that the plan wasn't bigger, wasn't more. "That's good," his mom said quickly, squeezing Daniel's hand. "That's real good. Electricians make decent money," they did. And more importantly, Bennett Tech didn't care about his reading scores. They cared about whether you could wire a circuit without electrocuting yourself. They cared about whether your hands could do what your brain understood. For the first time in his life, school clicked. Not the reading parts, not the written tests, but the actual work. When the instructor showed them how to bend conduit, how to pull wire, how to read electrical diagrams, something in Daniel's brain just got it. The diagrams made sense in a way regular books never had. They were maps, puzzles, problems with clear solutions. "You've got good instincts," his instructor, Ray Martinez, told him one day. "You see things other guys miss." Daniel graduated from Bennett Tech in 2 years with top marks in practical skills. He was 20 years old, living at home and ready to work. He got hired by a small electrical company in Queens. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. He'd leave before sunrise, come home after dark, and hand most of his paycheck to his mom. But working for someone else, following someone else's schedule, fixing someone else's problems, it started to feel too small. Daniel would see things on job sites, shortcuts the company took to save money, customers who needed more help than they were getting, problems that weren't being solved because they weren't profitable enough. 2 years into that job, his uncle called. Uncle Ray, his dad's younger brother, who'd always been a bit of a wild card. Sometimes he had money, sometimes he was broke, but he always had schemes. "I got something for you," Uncle Ray said. "A van, needs some work, but it runs. You want it?" "What's wrong with it?" "What isn't wrong with it?" Uncle Ray laughed. "But I know you can fix it. And I'm thinking maybe you could use it. Start your own thing. Be your own boss." The van was a disaster. Dense rust, an engine that sounded like it was coughing up rocks. But Daniel saw what it could be. He spent 3 months of nights and weekends bringing it back to life. New alternator, patched rust, paint job that wasn't pretty but was clean. He painted his phone number on the side in careful letters. D. Thompson Handyman Services. His first customer was Mrs. Chen from the 4th floor of his building. Her garbage disposal was broken. He fixed it in 20 minutes and charged her $30. She told her sister. Her sister told her neighbor. Her neighbor told his boss. Word spread the way it does in neighborhoods where people actually know each other. The kid from PS 147, the one who'd barely graduated, he could fix anything. And he showed up when he said he would. And his prices were fair, and he didn't talk down to you or make you feel stupid for not knowing how things worked. The work was hard. Daniel would wake up at 5 in the morning, check his pager, plan his route. Some days he'd have 8 jobs. Some days he'd have none. Money was tight. There were weeks when he wasn't sure he could pay for gas. But slowly, steadily it grew. By the time he was 25, he needed help. He hired Jerome, a kid from the neighborhood who'd just gotten out of Rikers. Nobody else would hire him because of his record. Daniel didn't care about that. He cared that Jerome showed up on time and wasn't afraid of hard work. "Why'd you hire me?" Jerome asked him one day. "Because everybody deserves a second chance," Daniel said. "And because I know what it's like when people count you out before you even start." Jerome became his best worker. Then he hired Miguel, who'd dropped out of high school and was working dead-end jobs. Then he hired Kevin, who was 50 years old and had just lost his factory job. People that other companies passed over. People who just needed someone to believe they could do it. By his early 30s, Daniel had 15 people working for him. He bought real trucks, not vans held together with prayers and duct tape. He got proper insurance. He got licensed and bonded. He changed the name to Second Chance Services because that's what it was really about. The business grew. Not explosion growth, but steady, solid growth. They did handyman work, electrical, plumbing, property maintenance. He got contracts with landlords who needed reliable people to manage their buildings. He got contracts with small businesses who needed someone they could trust. Daniel got married when he was 31. Her name was Lisa, and she was a teacher at a middle school in the Bronx. They met when he was fixing the heating system at her school. She saw how gentle he was with the kids who stopped to watch him work, how he'd explain what he was doing, how he never made anyone feel dumb for asking questions. "You're good at this," she said to him. "At fixing heaters? At teaching. You should think about that." He laughed. "I barely graduated high school. So? You know things. Real things. Things people need to know." She had a point. All his guys, he'd trained them, taught them skills they used to support their families. Maybe teaching didn't have to look like a classroom with books and tests. Maybe it could look different. But he was busy building the business. Too busy to think about bigger dreams. Too busy to notice that the old building he'd grown up in, Public School 147, had been sitting empty for years. The school had closed 5 years earlier. Budget cuts, declining enrollment, all the usual reasons schools close in neighborhoods people forget about. The building just sat there, windows broken, covered in graffiti, chain link fence around it to keep people out. Daniel drove past it every day. It hurt to see it like that. All those memories, good and bad, just rotting away. The basement where Mr. Pete had taught him about heating systems. The classroom where he'd struggled to read. The hallways where he'd felt so small and stupid and worthless. One Saturday morning, he parked his truck across the street and just stared at the building. Lisa was with him. They'd been talking about buying a house, maybe starting a family. They had some money saved up. Not a lot, but some. "What are you thinking about?" Lisa asked. "That building, what about it?" "I don't know. Just seems wrong for it to sit there empty. This neighborhood needs things. It needs places for kids to go. Needs programs. Needs opportunities." Lisa looked at him with that expression she got when she could see his brain working on something. "You're thinking about doing something with it. That's crazy, right?" "Probably," she said. "But tell me anyway," so he told her. The idea that had been forming in his head, probably for years without him realizing it. What if he bought the building? What if he turned it into something the neighborhood actually needed? A community center, maybe. A place to teach skills, real skills, the kind that got people jobs. A place for local small businesses to rent cheap office space. A place for kids after school so they weren't on the streets. The city would sell it? Lisa asked. "I don't know. Maybe. How much would something like that cost?" "I don't know. A lot. More than we have." "Would the business survive it?" "I don't know." Lisa was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You should find out." That's how it started. Not with a big dramatic decision, but with a quiet, "You should find out" on a Saturday morning. Staring at an abandoned building that had once held all his failures and all his small victories. Daniel started making calls. He talked to the city. He talked to real estate agents. He talked to community organizations. Everyone had the same reaction. Interest followed by doubt, followed by that look. That look that said, "Are you sure you can handle this?" He'd seen that look his whole life. He was used to it by now. The building was going to auction. The city wanted to get rid of it, and they didn't care much about who bought it or what they did with it. They just wanted it off their books. The auction was set for 6 months away. 6 months to get financing. 6 months to put together a plan. 6 months to figure out if this crazy idea was actually possible, or if it was just another way for Daniel to prove everyone right, who'd ever said he'd fail. The first bank Daniel walked into was downtown, all glass and marble and people in suits that cost more than his truck. He'd worn his best clothes, the ones he saved for weddings and funerals, and he still felt like everyone could tell he didn't belong there. The loan officer was a woman named Patricia, maybe in her 40s, with perfect hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked at his business records, his tax returns, his credit score. Everything was spread out on her big desk between them. "So let me make sure I understand," Patricia said. "You want to borrow $3 million to buy an abandoned school building and turn it into a community center?" "Yes, ma'am." "And your business, while profitable, has assets of approximately $400,000. "Yes, ma'am." "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate you coming in. I really do. But this bank doesn't typically make loans of this size for projects of this nature, with your level of collateral. Have you considered a more modest investment? Perhaps a smaller commercial property?" That was the polite version of no. He got less polite versions at 2 other banks. One loan officer actually laughed, not in a mean way, but in a "you can't be serious" way that somehow felt worse. Daniel went home that night and found Lisa at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere. She'd been researching community development lenders, nonprofit financing, grant opportunities. She'd filled a whole notebook with information. "How'd it go?" she asked. They all said no. "Okay, so we tried different banks. Lisa, maybe they're right. Maybe this is too big. Maybe I'm being stupid." She looked up at him with those fierce eyes that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare let them make you small. You built a business from nothing. You changed people's lives. This is just bigger, that's all. Bigger doesn't mean impossible." So they kept trying. Daniel went to community development lenders, credit unions, anywhere that might understand what he was trying to do. He put together a business plan with Lisa's help. Page after page of numbers and projections and dreams written down in careful detail. He got letters of support from neighborhood organizations. The Boys and Girls Club wrote one. The local church wrote one. Small businesses wrote them. People who'd known Daniel since he was a kid, who'd seen him grow up, who believed in what he was trying to do. Meanwhile, word was getting out about the auction, and not everyone thought Daniel's plan was good. A developer named Richard Castellano had his eye on the property. Castellano owned half the new luxury condos in Brooklyn. He saw opportunity where Daniel saw community. He saw profit where Daniel saw purpose. "I heard you're going after the old PS-147, Castellano said one day. He'd shown up at Daniel's office unannounced, wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000. "News travels fast," Daniel said. "Let me give you some advice. Business to business. That building's a money pit. The foundation's shot. The roof needs replacing. There's probably asbestos, lead paint. Who knows what else. You'll sink $1 million into repairs before you even start your community center project. I know what's wrong with it. I grew up in that building." "Then you should know better than to buy it. Look, I respect what you're trying to do. It's noble. But noble doesn't pay the bills. You've got a good business. Don't risk it on some emotional investment. Walk away, let someone with deeper pockets handle it." Daniel kept his voice even. "Thanks for the advice." "There's another option," Castellano said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. "I win the auction, I develop it, and I set aside some units for affordable housing. Still helps the community, right? And you don't risk everything you've built. That's not the same thing. It's close enough, and it's smart." After Castellano left, Daniel's business partner Frank came into the office. Frank had been with him for 7 years, handled all the accounting, all the business side of things that Daniel wasn't great at. "You're really doing this?" Frank asked. "Yeah. Daniel, I love you like a brother, but this is crazy. If you lose that auction, we're out the time and money we spent trying to get financing. If you win, we're leveraged up to our eyeballs. One bad year and we lose everything. I know the risks. Do you? Because I've been running the numbers and they're terrifying. We'd have to keep the business running at full capacity, just to make the loan payments. No room for error. No room for a recession or a slow period or anything going wrong. Frank, when has anything in my life not been risky? Starting this business was risky. Hiring guys nobody else would hire was risky. Everything worth doing is risky. This is different. This isn't just your future on the line. It's all of our futures. The 15 guys we employ, their families. Me and my family. Your family. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Frank said. The responsibility he had to his employees. To Lisa. To everyone depending on him. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe this was too much. Maybe he should focus on what he had instead of reaching for what he didn't. He got out of bed and went to the living room. Lisa found him there an hour later, staring at nothing. "You're thinking about backing out," she said. "How'd you know?" "Because I know you. And I know you're scared. You should be scared. This is terrifying. So maybe I shouldn't do it." Lisa sat down next to him. "When I met you, you told me about being a kid in that school. About how everyone made you feel stupid. About how you thought you'd never amount to anything. You remember what else you told me?" "No. You said the janitor, Mr. Pete, he told you that you were smart, just different smart. And you said that one person believing in you changed everything." "One person?" "Yeah. So how many kids are in that neighborhood right now feeling exactly how you felt? How many of them need one person to believe in them? How many of them need to learn that there's different ways to be smart? Different paths to success?" Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. "A lot. You could be their Mr. Pete. You could be that person for hundreds of kids. Maybe thousands over the years, or you could play it safe. Both choices are okay, Daniel, but you need to decide who you want to be." The next morning, Daniel called Frank into his office. "I'm doing this," he said. "I understand if you don't want to be part of it. I'll buy out your stake in the business, fair market value. No hard feelings. But I'm going to that auction and I'm going to try to win." Frank was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I think you're crazy. I think we're all crazy, but okay. Let's do it." 3 weeks before the auction, Daniel finally got approved for financing. Not from a bank, but from a community development lender that specialized in projects like his. The terms weren't great. Higher interest rate than a regular bank. Shorter repayment period. But it was possible. They believed in him. The approval came with conditions. He needed to put down 20%. He needed to show community support. He needed to have a clear plan for generating revenue to cover the loan payments. He met every condition. Now came the hard part. Actually winning the auction. Castellano would be there with his deep pockets. So would other developers, other investors, all of them seeing dollar signs where Daniel saw something different. People started finding out what Daniel was trying to do. The local newspaper ran a story. A small one, but still. Local business owner attempts to save community landmark. Someone posted it on social media and it spread. Comments poured in. Some supportive. Some mocking. This is the guy who couldn't even read in elementary school and now he thinks he can run a community center? Another broke businessman who's about to learn a hard lesson. I hope he succeeds, but the odds are against him. One comment hit different, though. It was from someone named Jennifer Wilson. "Daniel Thompson fixed my sink when I was a single mom and couldn't afford a plumber. He charged me $20 and told me to pay him back whenever I could. I still have the invoice. I'm rooting for you, Daniel." Others followed. People he'd helped over the years. People whose lives he'd touched in small ways. They weren't the loud voices, but they were there. Quiet support from people who knew him, who believed in him. The night before the auction, Daniel's phone rang. It was his mom. She was 70 now, retired, living in the same apartment she'd raised him in. "Baby, I know you're nervous about tomorrow," she said. "Yeah, Mom. I am. You remember what I used to tell you? When you'd come home from school crying because you failed another test, you'd tell me I was smart. I'd tell you that you were my smart boy and the world just hadn't figured out how to see it yet. Well, the world's about to see it tomorrow. Win or lose, I'm proud of you. Your father would be proud of you too." His dad had passed 2 years earlier. Heart attack at the factory. He'd worked himself to death trying to provide for his family. Daniel wished more than anything he could be there tomorrow. "Thanks, Mom. And Daniel, don't you let anyone make you feel small. You're not that scared kid anymore. You're the man who built something from nothing. You remember that?" He tried to sleep but couldn't. Kept running numbers in his head. Kept imagining walking into that auction room. Kept seeing Castellanos' confident face, his expensive suit, his certainty that he'd win. Lisa rolled over at 3 in the morning and found him still awake. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said, "we'll figure it out together. What if I lose?" "Then you lose. But at least you tried. At least you didn't let fear win." "What if I win but can't make it work? What if I fail and everyone loses their jobs and we lose everything? Then we fail." "But Daniel, you've been failing your whole life according to other people. And look at you now. Maybe you're just really good at proving people wrong." He laughed, despite everything. Maybe. The auction was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Daniel put on his suit. The same one he'd worn to all those banks that told him no. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw that kid from PS 147. The one who couldn't read. The one everyone said would never amount to anything. "Let's go prove them wrong one more time," he said to his reflection. The auction was being held at a government building downtown, in a room that smelled like old carpet and broken dreams. Rows of folding chairs faced a podium, where a city official would run the proceedings. Daniel got there 30 minutes early and took a seat near the back. He wanted to see who else showed up. Castellano arrived 20 minutes later with 2 guys in suits, probably lawyers or accountants or whoever rich developers bring to these things. He spotted Daniel and gave him a nod. Not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledgement. Like 2 boxers touching gloves before a fight, other bidders trickled in. A woman in her 60s with serious eyes and a leather briefcase. 2 younger guys who looked like they flipped properties for a living. A couple who kept whispering to each other nervously. 8 bidders total by the time the auction started. 8 people who wanted that building, all for different reasons. But then something strange happened. About 5 minutes before 10, people started filing into the back of the room. People Daniel knew. Jerome from his crew, taking a day off work to be there. Mrs. Chen from his old building. Ray Martinez, his instructor from tech school. Miguel and Kevin from his team. Then more people, neighbors, former customers, people he'd helped over the years. They kept coming until the back half of the room was full. Lisa squeezed his hand. "Looks like you've got some fans." Daniel's throat got tight. He hadn't told anyone about the auction except his employees and family. Somehow word had spread. Somehow all these people had shown up on a Tuesday morning to support him. The city official, a tired-looking man named James Porter, stepped up to the podium and explained the rules. Bidding would start at $1 million. Increments of 50,000. Highest bidder wins, but there'd be a 10-day inspection period and the sale had to close within 60 days. "All standard stuff. Let's begin," Porter said. "Do I have an opening bid of $1 million? The woman with the briefcase raised her paddle. $1 million. 1.1, one of the younger guys called out. 1.2, the nervous couple said together. It went fast at first. People jumping in with their bids, testing the waters, seeing who was serious. By the time it hit 2 million, half the bidders had dropped out. The nervous couple, one of the younger guys. The woman with the briefcase sat back with a sigh and shook her head. That left 4 bidders, Castellano, Daniel, and 2 others. 2.1, Daniel said, his voice steadier than he felt. 2.3, Castellano said without hesitation. 2.4, one of the other bidders called out. Back and forth it went. Each bid felt like jumping off a cliff. The number kept climbing, getting closer and closer to Daniel's absolute maximum. His hands were sweating. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his ears. At 2.7 million, one of the other bidders dropped out. Just 3 left now. 2.8, Daniel said. 2.9, Castellano said, and there was something in his voice. Confidence, like he knew he'd already won and was just going through the motions. The third bidder hesitated. 3 million. Daniel felt his stomach drop. 3 million was his limit. The absolute maximum his lender had approved. If he bid 3.1, he'd be going beyond what he could actually afford. He'd be lying, essentially, hoping to renegotiate later or find additional funding somehow. Castellano looked back at Daniel. Their eyes met. Castellano smiled. Not mean, not mocking, just confident, like he was saying, "This is where you bow out, kid. This is where the adults take over." That smile did something to Daniel. It brought back every person who'd ever doubted him, every teacher who'd sighed when they called on him, every bank that had said no, every look that said, "Are you sure you can handle this?" Frank leaned over and whispered, "Daniel, that's our limit. We can't go higher." 3.1, Daniel heard himself say. The room got quiet. Even the people in the back stopped shuffling around. Porter looked at Daniel. Sir, are you certain of that bid? Yes, sir. Castellano's smile faded. He looked at his lawyers or accountants or whoever they were. They whispered back and forth. Daniel could see them doing the math, trying to figure out if this building was worth getting into a bidding war over. 3.2, Castellano said. 3.3, the third bidder said, but his voice wavered. He was reaching his limit too. Daniel did the math in his head. If he bid 3.4, he'd be 300,000 over his approval. That was impossible. That was insane. That was the kind of risk that didn't just threaten his business, it threatened everything. His house, his savings, Lisa's savings, everything. 3.4, Daniel said. Lisa grabbed his arm but didn't say anything. Frank looked like he might be sick. In the back of the room, Daniel could feel all those people watching, hoping, believing in him even when he wasn't sure he believed in himself. The third bidder shook his head and lowered his paddle. He was out. Just Daniel and Castellano now. Castellano studied Daniel for a long moment. He could see it in the developer's eyes. The calculation. Was this building worth it? Was beating this nobody from Brooklyn worth paying more than he wanted to? 3.5, Castellano said. The number hit Daniel like a punch. 3.5 million. 800,000 over his approval. It wasn't just impossible anymore. It was fantasy. He'd lose his business for sure. Probably his house. Probably everything he'd built over 15 years of hard work. But if he let Castellano win, what happened to his dream? What happened to all those kids who needed what he wanted to create? What happened to proving that people like him, people who'd been counted out their whole lives, could do something that mattered? Porter looked at Daniel. Do I hear 3.6? The room was so quiet Daniel could hear the clock on the wall ticking. He thought about his mom, about his dad who'd worked himself to death, about Mr. Pete who'd been the first person to tell him he was smart in a different way. He thought about every kid sitting in a classroom right now feeling stupid, feeling worthless, feeling like they'd never amount to anything. He thought about Lisa telling him not to let fear win. 3.6, Daniel said. Someone in the back of the room gasped. Frank put his head in his hands. Lisa squeezed Daniel's arm so hard it hurt. Castellano sat perfectly still. The developers next to him were whispering urgently, probably telling him to walk away, that it wasn't worth it, that they could find another property. But Castellano wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Daniel. 3.7, Castellano said. Porter raised his gavel. Do I hear 3.8? This was it. This was the moment where Daniel had to decide who he was. Was he the scared kid who let other people define his limits? Or was he the man who'd built something from nothing, who'd given second chances because someone had given him one? The problem was 3.8 million wasn't courage. It was stupidity. It was financial suicide. It was gambling with other people's lives and livelihoods. Daniel opened his mouth. He wasn't sure what was going to come out. 3.8, he said. The room exploded. Not literally, but it felt like it. People in the back started talking, shouting support. Porter banged his gavel for quiet. Frank looked like he was going to pass out. Lisa had tears in her eyes. Castellano stared at Daniel for what felt like an hour but was probably 10 seconds. Then he did something Daniel didn't expect. He laughed. Not cruel laughter. Respect, maybe. Or disbelief that anyone would be crazy enough to bid this high for a broken-down school building. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the stupidest, Castellano said, loud enough for Daniel to hear. Maybe both, Daniel said back. Porter looked at Castellano. Sir, do I hear 3.9? Castellano shook his head. No, I'm out. 3.8 million going once, Porter said, raising his gavel. Going twice. He paused, giving Castellano one last chance to jump back in. Sold to bidder number 7 for $3.8 million. The people in the back erupted, cheering, clapping, shouting Daniel's name. He sat there in shock, not quite believing what had just happened. He'd won. He'd actually won. He'd also just committed to paying almost $1 million more than he could afford. Jerome pushed through the crowd and grabbed Daniel in a bear hug. You did it, boss. You actually did it. Mrs. Chen was crying. Ray Martinez was shaking his head with this huge smile. Miguel was filming everything on his phone. The room was chaos and celebration, and Daniel couldn't process any of it. Castellano walked over. Up close, Daniel could see he was older than he'd thought. Maybe 60, successful enough that losing one auction didn't matter to his bottom line. "Congratulations," Castellano said, extending his hand. "I meant what I said. You're either brave or stupid. I guess we'll find out which." Daniel shook his hand. "I guess we will. You know what you've gotten yourself into? That building's a disaster. The foundation alone is going to cost you $500,000. I know. I grew up in that building. I know every crack in the walls." Castellano studied him. "You really think you can pull this off? Turn it into whatever community center thing you're planning?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But I'm going to try." "Well," Castellano said, and something shifted in his expression. "If you need any advice, I'm around. I'm serious. No strings. I respect what you're trying to do, even if I think you're crazy." After Castellano left, Porter called Daniel up to sign the preliminary paperwork. His hand was shaking so bad he could barely hold the pen. He had 10 days to do the inspection, 60 days to close, and somehow, some way, he had to find $800,000 he didn't have. Outside the building, the crowd that had supported him was waiting. People patting him on the back, congratulating him, believing in him. He wanted to feel their joy. He wanted to celebrate, but all he could think about was the math. The impossible math that didn't add up no matter how many times he ran it in his head. Lisa pulled him aside. "You're freaking out." "I just spent $800,000 I don't have, Lisa. Yeah, I'm freaking out. We'll figure it out." "How? How do we figure it out?" "I can't go back to the lender and say, 'Hey, remember that amount you approved? I need $1 million more.' They'll laugh me out of the building." "Daniel, look at all these people. They showed up for you. They believe in you. We'll find a way." Frank walked up, still looking pale. "Daniel, we need to talk. Privately." They found a quiet corner away from the celebrating crowd. Frank pulled out his phone and showed Daniel a spreadsheet. "Numbers everywhere, none of them good. I've been running scenarios," Frank said. "Best case, absolute best case where everything goes perfect. We're still 300,000 short even if we liquidate everything. So what do we do?" "I don't know, man. Start a GoFundMe? Rob a bank?" Frank laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I'll be straight with you. I think we're in trouble. I think we might lose everything." Daniel leaned against the wall. 10 minutes ago he'd won. Now it felt like he'd lost. Like he'd made the biggest mistake of his life and dragged everyone he cared about down with him. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "Don't apologize. You did what you thought was right." That's more than most people can say. They stood there in silence, watching the crowd slowly disperse. All those happy faces, all that hope and celebration. None of them knew that Daniel had just bet everything on a hand he couldn't win. His phone buzzed. "Unknown number." He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Thompson, this is Robert Chen. You fixed my mother's garbage disposal a few years ago." "Oh yeah, I remember Mrs. Chen. How is she?" "She's good." "Listen, I saw the news about the auction. About what you're trying to do. I'm a financial advisor and I think I might be able to help. Can we meet?" Robert Chen met Daniel at a diner 2 days after the auction. He was in his 40s, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt, carrying a worn leather messenger bag. Not what Daniel expected a financial advisor to look like. But then again, Daniel had learned a long time ago that looks didn't tell you much about a person. "My mom talks about you all the time," Robert said after they ordered coffee. "She tells everyone about the young man who fixed her disposal and barely charged her anything. She says you're good people. I appreciate that. So I looked into your situation. You won the auction at $3.8 million, but your financing only covers $3 million. That's a problem." "Yeah," Daniel said. "That's putting it mildly. But here's the thing. What you're trying to do, it matters. It matters to people, like my mom. People who've lived in that neighborhood for decades, and there are people who want to help." Robert pulled out a laptop and showed Daniel something he called a community investment fund. Basically, local people could invest in the project in exchange for either a small return or tax benefits or just the satisfaction of knowing they'd helped their neighborhood. "It's not charity," Robert explained. "These are real investments, but they come from people who care about more than just making money. They care about what you're building. Over the next week, Robert helped Daniel set up the fund. They needed to raise $800,000. It seemed impossible. That was until the local newspaper ran a bigger story. Then a TV news station picked it up. Local man tries to save the school that said he'd fail. The story spread on social media. Not just locally, but wider. People started sharing it. Comments poured in. Some negative, sure, but mostly supportive. Stories from people who'd struggled in school, who'd been told they weren't smart enough, who saw themselves in Daniel. The investment started small. $500 from a retired teacher. $1,000 from a small business owner. $200 from a kid who'd saved up his allowance. Then bigger ones. $10,000 from a neighborhood church. $20,000 from a doctor who'd grown up poor. $50,000 from a successful lawyer who'd attended PS 147 back in the 70s. But it wasn't enough. 2 weeks before closing, they'd raised $400,000. Halfway there, but halfway wasn't going to cut it. Daniel was running out of time and options. That's when Frank came to him with an idea. We could take out a second mortgage on the business property. Use the equipment as collateral. It's risky as hell, but it would give us another $200,000. If we fail, we lose everything, Daniel said. We're already risking everything. What's a little more? They did it. The second mortgage, maxing out every credit line, pushing every chip to the center of the table. With 1 week until closing, they were still $200,000 short. Daniel couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Lisa would find him at 3 a.m. running numbers that still didn't add up no matter how many times he calculated them. His crew could see the stress on his face. Jobs were slipping. He was distracted, missing details he'd normally catch. The business was suffering and they hadn't even started the real work yet. Maybe we should walk away, Daniel said to Lisa one night. Lose the deposit but save the business. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want anymore. I'm tired, Lisa. I'm tired of fighting uphill. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe this was too big for someone like me. Someone like you? Lisa's voice got sharp. What does that mean? Someone who barely graduated high school? Someone who learned to read late? Is that what you think defines you? I don't know. Well, I do. You know what defines you? You're someone who sees people, really sees them. You're someone who gives chances when nobody else will. You're someone who built something real out of nothing. That's who you are. And if you walk away from this, it won't be because you couldn't do it. It'll be because you stopped believing you could. 4 days before closing, Daniel got a call from Castellano. The developer wanted to meet. Daniel figured he was calling to gloat or maybe offer to buy the contract. Instead, Castellano surprised him. I did some asking around about you, Castellano said. They were in his office, which had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. People speak highly of you. Say you're honest. Say you treat people right. I try. I heard you're short on funding. Daniel's stomach sank. Word travels fast. I'm going to offer you something, and I want you to hear me out before you say no. I'll invest $200,000 in your project. In exchange, I want nothing. What do you mean, nothing? I mean no equity, no interest, no return. Consider it a grant. My accountant will call it a charitable donation for tax purposes, but really, it's because I think what you're doing is important. Daniel stared at him. Why would you do that? Castellano was quiet for a moment. I grew up poor. Poorer than you, probably. I clawed my way up and I made a lot of money doing it. Built a lot of buildings, made a lot of people richer. But you know what? I never built anything that mattered. Not really. I built luxury condos for rich people to park their money. You're building something real. Something that'll help people who actually need help. So let me be part of that. Let me just once do something that matters. Daniel didn't know what to say. He'd spent so long seeing Castellano as the enemy, the rich developer who wanted to crush his dream. Now here he was, offering to save it. I don't know what to say. Say yes. And don't screw it up. Make it count. 3 days later, Daniel walked into the closing with every dollar accounted for. $3.8 million. Some from the bank, some from community investors, some from mortgaging everything he owned, and $200,000 from a developer who'd become an unlikely ally. The building was his. All of it. Every broken window, every cracked wall, every memory, good and bad. It was overwhelming and terrifying and the best feeling in the world all at once. The work started immediately. Daniel moved his crew over to focus on the building. He brought in contractors, engineers, architects. The city wasn't kidding about the problems. The foundation needed major work. The roof was shot. Asbestos had to be removed. Lead paint had to be remediated. Every day brought a new problem, a new cost, a new reason to panic. 6 months into the renovation, they were over budget and behind schedule. Daniel was working 18-hour days, managing his regular business and the renovation simultaneously. He lost 15 pounds, got stress headaches that wouldn't quit. Frank threatened to quit twice. 3 of his crew members actually did quit, saying it was too much chaos. But others stepped up. Jerome took on more responsibility. Miguel learned skills he never knew he had. The community started volunteering. Retired construction workers showed up on weekends. Teachers helped plan the curriculum for the educational programs. Local businesses donated materials they couldn't afford. 18 months after buying the building, longer than planned and more expensive than budgeted, the PS 147 Community Innovation Center opened its doors. The grand opening drew 500 people. The mayor came, the news cameras came. But more importantly, the neighborhood came. The building had been transformed. The first floor housed a free after-school program with tutoring, homework help, and activities. The second floor had vocational training workshops, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, HVAC, all the skills Daniel had learned, now being taught to the next generation. The third floor had 20 small offices renting at below-market rates to local entrepreneurs and nonprofits. In the basement, right where Mr. Pete's boiler room used to be, Daniel created a makerspace, tools, workbenches, equipment, a place where kids could learn that being smart with their hands was just as valuable as being smart with books. The program started with 50 kids. Within 6 months, they had a waiting list of 200. The vocational training graduated its first class, 20 students, 15 of whom got jobs within a month, real jobs with real pay and benefits. Daniel stood in the hallway one afternoon, watching kids flow past. Laughing, talking, learning. So different from when he'd walked these halls feeling worthless and stupid. A young boy, maybe 10, stopped and looked at him. "Are you Mr. Thompson?" the kid asked. "Yeah, that's me. My teacher says you used to go to school here, says you couldn't read good but you still did something amazing. I had help, a lot of help." "I can't read good either," the kid said quietly. The words get all mixed up. Daniel knelt down so he was eye level with the kid. "You know what? That's okay. Reading is just one way to be smart. There are lots of other ways. You good with your hands, like building things or fixing things?" The kid nodded. "I like taking stuff apart and putting it back together." "That's being smart. That's a different kind of smart, but it's just as good, maybe better. You keep doing that, okay? Don't let anyone tell you you're not smart enough." The kid smiled and ran off to join his friends. Daniel watched him go and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not just satisfaction, but peace, like all the struggle and doubt and fear had led exactly where it was supposed to. 3 years after opening, the center had served over 600 kids in the after-school program. 300 people had completed vocational training with an 87% job placement rate. 15 local businesses had launched from the office spaces, creating 42 new jobs in the neighborhood. The business survived. More than survived. Second Chance Services actually grew. Turned out that the publicity from the school project brought in new clients. People wanted to work with the company that cared about community. The crew that stayed became fiercely loyal. They weren't just employees anymore. They were part of something bigger.